Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 411. Might have stumbled that. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. And, per usual, a bit of all of that this week. I'm Robert Winfrey. I am your host. We are hot off the heels of UFC 243, a card that, if you looked at it on paper, it's about how it played out in practice. So we'll go over all of that. Our new undisputed middleweight champion. Really the only major news coming out of that event, in all honesty. But we'll go over all the results. Next week, the UFC is in Tampa for UFC on ESPN Plus 19. Headlined by former strawweight champion Joanna Jędrzejczyk fighting Michelle Waterson. Winners probably got next for Weili Zhang, in all honesty. The rest of that card, it's pretty solid. There's a lot of filler. But that's kind of common these days. There is, however, some pretty good fights there, if you know what to look for. And again, one of the benefits as well as downsides of watching as much MMA as I do, I can find little nuggets. I also know how many of these are just not all that good. So there's a lot of that. All right, that's kind of what we've got. And then, of course, news. So we'll get to the news when we get there. Here with me, per usual, my partner in crime, 411 Mania's jack of all trades, Jeff Harris is back in the building, everybody. Jeff, how you doing?
What I'd like to have right now is all you podcast peons to stand aside and let the ladies look at the body of a real MMA podcast. This is the 411 Ground and Pound Radio Show. Good evening, everybody. I'm Jeffrey Harris. You're welcome.
I appreciate a Scott Steiner reference. So
that
I will
say that's Rick Rude.
Oh, that's Rick Rude. Rick Rude. My mistake. Like, there's a couple other promos that are very similar.
If you want some, come get some. No, wait, that's Rick Steiner. The big bad booty daddy.
I mean, look, I could do Steiner math, but I don't think anyone wants to hear that. All right.
It was Rick Rude I was trying to evoke.
Yeah, I remember the promo in question now. My mistake. Again, Steiner has done a lot of similar promos. All right, UFC 243.
Yes.
Before we get bogged down in the minutia of pro wrestling promos.
If you're listening, thanks for listening tonight instead of watching Hell in the Cell, but it's not like you're missing much.
We're not live. It's recorded. Although Roman Reigns tearing his knee on that spot is...
if you're watching or listening to us instead of the Hell in a Cell replay, also thank you.
I will definitely take that as well. All right. Last night, UFC 243.
Good card overall.
If you looked at it on paper and went, okay, this looks great, this looks good, this is probably okay, hope that ends fast, it pretty much played out like that, one or two exceptions.
We wanted a great main event, and even though I predicted it wrong last week, we got a great main event.
Yeah, I officially picked Robert Whittaker as well, so shame on me.
I mean, I got it wrong. You got it wrong, but I'm not at all upset about that because we got a great fight out of it.
Yeah, I said in some of the build-up to this fight that the entirety of MMA in 2019, this is the fight I'm most looking forward to. I absolutely stand by that. I don't think there's anything on the rest of the year that will. Not saying nothing's going to be better, because there were better fights. There's at least like 3 better fights than this one was.
I mean,
in practice,
I thought that Adesanya was capable of winning. I'm not sure I saw him winning by knockout in the second round, but I mean, the dude, he's got skills.
Brandon Gibson did, man. He called that exactly right.
Mm.
Yeah, for those of you unaware, Israel Adesanya knocks out Robert Whittaker with punches in the second round. Very, very high-level fight. Whittaker was winning the first round, competitive first round, but I thought Whittaker was winning it until like the last second when he gets floored with a punch. Then in the second, Adesanya just seemed to have him figured out at that point. Whittaker didn't adjust. They got into an exchange. Adesanya clobbers him with a left hook, finishes him on the mat. I would love to get into more detail about some of this, and I will a little bit, but I also need to watch it a second time before I can really kind of sink my teeth into it. These two are so good, it requires multiple viewings to really get a feel for what happened. Again, I have some broad strokes that I will line out here, but Adesanya, man, I'm not saying he's the best fighter in the world. I don't think he is. But man, that guy is impressive. I think he's had one of the most impressive ascents to a UFC championship win. I'm not sure the most, because there's different criteria and how you weight them differently might play a factor in, again, how you kind of feel about these things. But that's one of them. That's probably one of the top three impressive ascents to the UFC title that I've seen. He just went out there and freaking starched Robert Whittaker, whose praises I've been singing for a long time.
In February 2018, and basically just over a year and a half, he went from debuting in the UFC to becoming the undisputed champion of the middleweight division.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, again, some guys have done it faster. Some guys have beaten
Silva.
Silva did it in his second fight.
But Silva had a lot more MMA fights at that point.
Yeah, Silva was very much a finished product by and large when he got to the UFC. Brock Lesnar, I think, won it in his third. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure his third UFC fight.
1-1 and then beat Couture.
Yeah.
So yeah, his third UFC fight.
UFC fight. Who's the other guy who did it really fast? I mean, and you had people debut as champion.
But he's still undefeated in MMA, and he was undefeated when he came in.
Yeah, Whittaker undefeated.
Had a bit of a lengthy had a strong kickboxing career.
Very good kickboxing career.
Yeah. Transition. He was still doing kickboxing when he started MMA. Then had a successful transition to MMA, and here we are. I mean, I did not expect. I expected him to be like a hot commodity and like a top fighter. I didn't expect him to win the title this soon, though.
Yeah, he's taken.
My gut was telling me, and I was wrong, but my gut was telling me this was like Darren Till all over again. Is how this sort of felt like to me, and I was wrong, but it reminded me of that.
I can kind of see where you would get similar vibes. I think the primary point of differentiation between the two comes down to one is like fight details that you have to be, someone who spends a lot of time deliberately dissecting things to maybe find. But
even then, you can we've seen.
I mean, and there's also, the other thing would be quality of win.
But Robert, we've seen so much, dissections and analysis will simply go out the window when a fight actually happens.
Sometimes, yeah. I think at that point again, it's kind of trying to play the odds. It's like ring rust, which I think played a factor in Whittaker losing. Not making excuses for the guy, but the fact that he fought twice in 29 months is by all logic suboptimal.
He was doing very well in that first round until the very end.
He was winning. I thought he was winning the round up until that knockdown.
Yeah, but then I think you kind of had to give the first round to Adesanya because of the knockdown, right?
Especially that kind of knockdown. That wasn't a.
And if that happened a little sooner, that could have been the end of the fight too, right?
I think if there's 5 more seconds after that knockdown, Adesanya finishes it.
How did that? I didn't hear the sound very well. How did that knockdown at the end of the first round play out? If you can describe it.
Robert Whittaker hits the ground right about the same time the horn sounds to end the round. I haven't timed it out, but
because when I was watching the fight live, I never even heard the bell sound the end of or the horn sound the end of the round.
Neither did John Anik. I did, and I would. Let me also be clear. I think if Whittaker doesn't kind of get up as the way he does, as quickly as he does, that Mark Goddard might have waved it off anyway if he was out cold. Like, that would have been a perfectly valid finish if Whitaker doesn't behave the way that he does.
Right. Like, I think, do you remember BJ Penn versus Sean Shark from 2008? I think, was it UFC 84? Might have been 88.
Yeah, that was very close to the end. I mean, there have been buzzer beaters or near buzzer beaters like that in the past.
Like, it didn't look like an immediate stoppage in that fight. It was like the very end of the round. And it looked like Shark was maybe saved by the bell, but he didn't answer for the next round. So
you had a similar thing. You had a similar situation with the fight continuing when Anderson Silva fought Michael Bisping. You know, he basically knocked him out with that flying knee, but It was right at the end of the round, and Bisping kind of made all the intimations that he could continue. And there was, again, some of the confusion there. So it does happen. I have no issue with the way it played out.
Right. But here last night, I felt like Whitaker, it wasn't like he was complete. Did he look completely out to you? What do you think? Or was it a flash knockout?
What, in the first?
Yeah. What happened in the first?
He got hit really clean. I mean, he fell backward stiff as a board, man. Like,
he did.
Again, there's different categories of knockdowns. Anytime you fall stiff like that, that's a really bad sign. I mean, again, he got up, and all credit to him, that same punch knocks out the majority of the human race. But that was a pretty gnarly one, and sometimes you just get hit. You get hit in the wrong spot at the wrong time. Maybe you don't see it coming. You know, Adesanya is not a Yoel Romero in terms of just like, okay, we're going to hook you up to this machine and calculate how much force you generate. But he can punch. So
power. Not that it would have made a difference. I would have liked to see Whitaker mix it up with the grappling and the wrestling more with this fight, because we haven't seen too much. We haven't seen Adesanya have to deal with too much of that yet.
But not recently. I don't think no one's really like actively tried to grapple him since the Brunson fight.
I mean, no one that's. I mean, Whitaker is a pretty high level wrestler in grappling. You know.
That, in some respects, yes. I mean, again, the man qualified he qualified twice for the Commonwealth Games representing Australia.
Is that not pretty high level?
I mean, I'm going to say, I don't mean to insult anyone from Australia listening. I really don't. Australia does not have the richest history of freestyle wrestling at the international level. So,
he has a history working on that.
He's worked incredible. And again, just qualifying to represent at something like that is prestigious. I mean, I'm not saying you could drop me over there and I could do it. I think you could take. Oh God, I am not trying to insult anyone here, and I am not the most knowledgeable about this, but I imagine the majority of, like, if you took the top 20 Division I collegiate wrestlers in the United States, they'd probably have a better than average shot of accomplishing what he accomplished in as far as representing. Now that being said, he was preparing to go, wrestle against guys from all the different. The Commonwealth Games are basically, there's 50 some odd countries that take place. I think most of them were colonized by the British. So the Indians are there. And you know what? The Indians, in fact, and this is the country of India, they do have a darn good wrestling tradition. There are some darn good wrestlers that come out of that country. So he was prepared to go do that, and he's not used a lot of his wrestling in his MMA career because he's never. I mean, again, I mentioned this last week, and for some reason I forgot his fight with Uriah Hall. Maybe because I find Uriah Hall so utterly forgettable.
Defensively, he looked spectacular in his 2 fights against Yoel Romero, who's an Olympic medalist.
Yeah, I mean, again, his ability to stop people who want to grapple him and then and then take them out on the feet, essentially, is what led to his success. But it's the same kind of thing that, and I said this, a slightly different context, mind you, but I said this about Joanna Jędrzejczyk during her reign of terror, mind you. I think it was going into the Valerie Letourneau fight. I said, I don't really expect her to get a finish here because she's fighting someone who is a competent striker. Whereas, Carla Esparza's striking when they fought was just the worst. And it's
not a striker.
No, she wasn't then, isn't now. Neither's Jessica Penne. Those women actively fled from the striking exchanges. Valerie Letourneau engaged in them. And what we got was, again, Joanna being the better striker, clearly winning the fight. But there's just this fundamental difference among whenever you watch, especially a diverse sport like mixed martial arts. Chuck Liddell, big reign to prominence was everybody wants to take him down, nobody can, and then he knocks them out because they don't know what they're doing on the feet.
Right.
What happens when he starts fighting strikers like Rampage or Vanderlei or Jardine? He starts losing. And let me rephrase. What?
Lost to Keith Jardine, who's more of a counter striker type.
He gets knocked out by Rampage, gets decisioned cleanly. I don't know, whatever judge gave that fight to Liddell should never be allowed to judge fights again. Loses to Keith Jardine cleanly.
Right.
Winds up wrestling Vanderlei Silva to win the third round and make sure he wins the fight. Gets knocked out by Rashad Evans. Rewatch the Evans fight. Rashad doesn't try to wrestle him at all. Fighters whose success is predicated on stopping their opponent from imposing their skill set. So, Damian Maia is another example, right?
Right.
Damian Maia wants to stop you striking with him and force you to grapple. What happens when he runs into somebody who's A, willing to grapple with him, or B, is able to stop him doing that? He tends to lose.
Well,
and I'm not saying Robert Whittaker can't beat strikers.
What I like about Adesanya, despite, his kickboxing background, he mixes things up. He's adjusted to MMA very well, and you don't always see that out of primarily kickboxers and strikers.
He's adjusted unbelievably well. The way he moves around the cage.
Phil Davis is a very good fighter and athlete, don't get me wrong, but he never really developed his transitional game, and he was always so awkward when he's not doing the submission, the wrestling, the grappling, and he can't just switch it up very well and change levels and all that. Adesanya doesn't have that.
Yeah, Adesanya is an incredibly spectacular fighter.
I saw a couple things, and the things I noticed, and I could be wrong, but I wanted to get your thoughts on these. I think Adesanya's length and reach last night made a big difference because, 80 to 73. And Adesanya did get hit a few times, but I also noticed that he was really good at kind of engaging as he was getting hit and kind of leaning his body back. Did you see that stance where he almost had his body leaning back? But as he's leaning back, he's still throwing really hard strikes as he's sort of leaning out of the impact from Whittaker's striking attempts and still managing to engage and land damaging clean shots from a very just sort of weird striking position. Is that something you noticed at all, or am I crazy here?
No, that's definitely a thing that happened. He did a lot of leaning, and that's both good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say good and bad. There are positives and negatives to employing that defense, like anything else. There's ways to get around it. There's strengths it has.
Even though he was eating shots last night, it seemed to be an effective difference maker.
He did a few things. One, I think the only punches Whittaker landed consistently were his jab, which is fine. I think he's got the best jab in the sport. He found that a few times, but any other punches he was really trying to get going, even when he was like sort of landing, there's two things Adesanya was doing incredibly well to mitigate. One was just rolling with the punches. He was able to kind of figure out which side it's coming from, move with the punch, which takes some of the sting off. The other thing he does incredibly well is framing. He was doing this in kickboxing, and he's transitioned it to MMA very, very well. Anytime you get in close, you could see this especially into the second round when Whittaker would kind of blitz forward and look to swing on him. He'd have one hand up, both disrupting the punching lane and potentially even just framing off the bicep of Whittaker when he's trying to swing, so he never really gets the punch going the way he wants to. It's a very sophisticated defensive technique. It has, all of these things have points and counterpoints. This is not.
Well, yeah, I mean,
it's not impenetrable.
That first round up until that knockdown toward the end, Whittaker was having some success early on.
Yeah, I think the primary.
Gastelum did too, for that matter.
Yeah, Gastelum's success in the first round was largely predicated off of, I think, that kind of because he got a bit of a knockdown right before, I think, like halfway through the first round. I think I can't remember the timing on it, but there was a bit of a knockdown from Gastelum in the first. Here again, while Adesanya, I thought Whittaker was going to. I would have given that first round to Whittaker prior to the knockdown,
right?
But it was not by a huge margin. They were both having bits of success.
I was only marginally giving it to Whittaker until the knockdown. That's why I felt the knockdown was enough to give that first round to Adesanya, because there wasn't a whole. It was sort of back and forth. There wasn't a whole lot of significant. I think when we even saw strikes thrown, it wasn't like a big disparity, as I recall, in the first round.
In terms of numerically, no, I don't think.
No, numerically. So I feel like that was the difference maker in the first round to give the first round to Adesanya. I kind of feel for Whittaker.
Yeah, this sucks.
He gets a stadium fight in his home country. Is Melbourne his hometown? I'm not sure.
No, he was actually born in New Zealand.
No, okay. But, you know, he was really the hometown guy for this fight, for all intents and purposes. Over 55,000 people. And never even got a single title defense in during his entire title run, and part of that's due to Yoel Romero's just.
Yeah, that one's not on him, but that is true.
And that kind of makes me a little bit angry.
It sucks, but it does happen.
Middleweight's very competitive right now. As good as Adesanya looks right now, I'm not sure how long I see him holding this title. It's a competitive division. It's very competitive.
It is. It sucks for Whittaker. He also, I mean, again, he's fought like twice in 29 months, which is a horrible schedule.
Right. Well, as he said in interviews, that was not his decision.
No, again, some of this was injury related. Sucks. It happens. Some of this was the UFC deciding, okay, maybe he could have fought earlier, but we're going to have this fight on this card. It sucks, but
he needed time to heal up and train.
Yeah. No, it does suck. And
his opponent had just fought. Adesanya's had a very hectic schedule too, and let's see, when did he last fight?
Earlier this year when he fought Gastelum.
April. So, he didn't have a huge. And this was Adesanya's third fight this year. So Adesanya's been fairly active.
He fought, 4 times in 18, 3 times in 19?
Yeah. So it's just kind of. This is just kind of the thing about fighting in MMA. It's the logistics. And when is this person healthy? When is that person? When can this person fight?
Some of it's logistical. Some of it is the culture that the UFC, that MMA has relative to
So
other combat sports.
Paulo Costa was at the event last night to watch the fight. He denies that he was there to be a backup for the fight. I think he was just there to kind of scout the main event and hopefully get his name in there as the next potential contender.
I think he's the next contender.
I think he is, but like now Adesanya's already looking for a fight with John Jones, and
oh god,
we already got now we got that brewing, and
I can't speak for anyone else. I have zero interest right now in Jones Adesanya.
I mean, I know, but Adesanya, he's got like that superstar factor right now. He's got the it factor. Yeah. And he's going to have the media are all constantly going to be asking and pecking about this. Excuse me. And he fuels it too, because he's been calling out John Jones a lot. So
they've been sniping at each other. That's definitely true. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it this year. I don't want to see it next year. I just don't.
I mean, let Adesanya defend the title a couple times. We have a competitive division right now. We have our ex-contender, in Paulo Costa.
Yep, the next two.
Let's try and see if Adesanya can cement his title reign and defend the belt before we anoint him the next Conor McGregor or whatever, who never even defended his belts in the first place. So
again, Conor never defended a belt.
Exactly. So
I think
he's got all the makings of superstardom right now, but you can't force everything. Now that he has the title, let's see if he can cement that and see if he can beat Paulo Costa. That's what I think has to happen.
Yeah, again, you've got Costa lined up. You've got, Whitaker potentially getting I don't want Whitaker to get an immediate rematch. I don't think it's deserved, and that sucks. But I like Robert Whitaker, but
I mean, look, Jared Cannonier is in the mix right now.
You've got Kelvin Gastelum and Darren Till fighting soon. You have Cannonier in the mix. I mean, Hermansson's coming off the loss, but 2 more wins, and suddenly he's he's still a somewhat relevant player in the picture.
Romero could get back in there again at some point.
Romero could get back in there rather easily.
The thing is, if Jacare and Weidman are moving up, that could free up some spots higher up the weight class. But Paulo Costa is the next contender, while the rest of the division can sort itself out. So we don't need to see that fight right away. We can see this fight next year.
I'd be fine if that fight doesn't. I'd be fine if Jones versus Adesanya. Look, wait until 2021, and let's see what happens by that point. Let's see if that's still.
If Adesanya is going to be active, let's see him try to defend the belt a couple times and see if he can hold on to it first.
Yeah, and
we start talking about a Jones fight.
And he and Costa's a really compelling fight in some respects. I mean,
and so is Jones. If Jones fights Blachowicz, he has a fight lined up, right?
I think so. I'm pretty sure.
I thought he was going to fight Jones, and then I think he got a fight.
Yeah, no, Blachowicz is fighting Jacare.
Right. Surprising.
Yeah, that was a bit of an odd one. I want to see, again, Costa and Adesanya. Costa presents some problems that are somewhat unique to the reality of Paulo Costa.
I agree. Now, I tend to favor Adesanya in that fight.
Ditto.
But, as you say, I think Costa presents some interesting problems. I think it's a tough, challenging fight for Adesanya. And I think it's the perfect fight. I think it's the perfect fight for his first title defense. Don't you agree?
Yeah. I mean, again, Costa's the deserving contender. It would only be the second time in UFC history you had 2 undefeated fighters fighting for a belt.
I mean, there you go.
For those of you wishing to play the trivia game, the other one was Machida and Rashad Evans.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, it doesn't happen a whole lot. So, yeah, go for it.
That was 10 and a half years ago, basically.
Aren't we just old? Because I remember the build for that fight.
It was May 2000. It was May 2009, as I recall. Yeah.
I'm old.
That was a great finish, but yeah.
As for Whitaker, yeah, Cannonier maybe, Hermanson maybe, something to do with Gastelum, like the loser of Till Gastelum, possibly. You still got options for the guy. He's only 28. God, he's young.
And again, since Weidman and Jacare are out of the equation, he might not have to, take a bunch of fights to get back to the title level.
Now, I imagine at a minimum one. Again, I don't think an immediate rematch is called for in this situation.
Give him at least one. Maybe not Yoel. Maybe the winner of Till. Maybe the winner of Till versus Gastelum. I wouldn't mind that.
Kind of depends on who wins and how they do it, because you might want to put that person in the title picture. He was supposed to fight Gastelum.
Yeah, so.
Which was a good fight then. It's still a good fight.
I feel like the winner of that fight wouldn't be deserving of a title shot just after that fight. Especially because Gastelum already just lost to Adesanya. I think, and if Till wins, he's coming off of back-to-back losses, right? And then
I guess there's a lot of, for that fight, it's going to be a lot of context. If Darren Till goes out there and flatlines Gastelum in the first round, I mean, again, history repeats itself, maybe, but
I think that's a bad idea, because I think that's kind of the same problem you ran into with him at welterweight.
It would be, but that doesn't mean it wouldn't happen.
I'm
not advocating for it. I'm simply saying it is a thing that could happen.
I mean, you could do the Cannonier fight. Cannonier is a big fight now.
Yeah, I think next for Cannonier is either going to be Romero or Whitaker.
I mean,
Cannonier. Those are the two most.
I mean, the dude is transformed into a top fighter all of a sudden, and he's due for a big fight in the top 5 now.
Yeah, Cannonier's definitely going to be hitting at the top of the division. That's where his next fight's going to be. So it's again, there's options for both guys.
I mean, look, for a card that didn't have a lot in the way of elite top names on it, I mean, this was the fight. It delivered. I loved last night. I think they did a good job in terms of presentation. We had the Ron Perlman voiceovers, which have been a fairly regular UFC staple in recent years. But we had the augmented reality graphics, which I liked, and the entrance tunnel. I thought was a nice touch, because it just kind of gave, normally UFC doesn't have much in the way of an entrance set. But I thought what they did with the little tunnel was a good touch. And then Adesanya had his what were they called? His dance crew that for his entrance.
I must have missed if they gave them a specific name.
There was a name. The dance. It reminded me of a haka, right?
Yeah, not
a haka.
I know what a haka is. I don't know. That was just more a dance routine set to what they had.
It wasn't the haka, but it was.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean.
I'm
all for. Look, I don't need giant.
I liked all the bells and whistles last night.
They did bust out a lot of them, and I'm not. I'm a bit of an odd case, because I like the more minimalistic stuff, but at the same time, giving fighters the option to differentiate themselves a little bit in ways like that is something the UFC has been sorely lacking, and it's a direction they've needed to take for a while.
I think it's fine to see it every once in a while.
I mean, I don't need everyone getting pyro.
For a big fight like this, in a stadium main event title fight, I think it was fine. I think it worked.
Yeah. I mean, my big thing is, I don't need to see it for every fighter, but MMA entrances, especially UFC entrances, are deeply repetitive and boring. So getting to breaking up that monotony a little bit, you know what? Yeah, It's not a bad thing, I think.
I enjoyed it.
So that was your main event. Really good fight. Really, really great display of high-level mixed martial arts.
I got to pat you on the back here because I think you picked Hooker for the co-main, correct?
I did.
Well,
yeah.
I was very unimpressed with Al Iaquinta last night.
That's been my stance on him for years. In your co-main event, Dan Hooker defeats Al Iaquinta via unanimous decision, 230-27s, 130-26. I was 30-26. I think I gave Hooker a 10-8 first because Al just landed nothing. Nearly got choked out at one point. Great, surgical performance from Dan Hooker. He's going to struggle with the dangerous, multi-level athletic fighters, guys like Barboza.
Really good last night, though. I thought he showed a ton of improvement, maturity, calmness, and patience as well.
He's a deeply analytical fighter. He's always been a very patient fighter. It's part of his success against a lot of people. There's a handful of styles that it's just going to get him in trouble against, and we saw that with Barboza. He was content to not fight Barboza optimally because he's used to fighting a certain way, and the way he fights plays into how Barboza fights.
Iaquinta tried really hard to work the wrestling against Hooker, had no success.
None whatsoever. He would get either stuffed or his neck threatened.
Right. He went really deep on that single leg, and Hooker just wouldn't let him have it. I was real impressed with that.
Iaquinta is going to wind up ranked rather highly because there's two reasons. One of which is legitimate, more or less. One of which is not. The fact that he went 5 rounds with Khabib when he was a literal last day replacement fighter gets overblown.
He's a tough fighter.
I'm not saying let me be clear. Al Iaquinta is a tough out for a lot of people. He presents a couple of very specific problems that if you're not prepared to deal with, will shut you down.
This is sort of where I see him throughout his career, though. Sort of a perennial top 10, fringe top 5 competitor, basically.
I mean, he'll stay ranked higher just because of that win over Kevin Lee.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, Lee's coming back to lightweight, and he's fighting Gregor Gillespie, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. It's a great fight, by the way. But again, Iaquinta does about 3 things. And when those 3 things aren't enough to get him a win, all he does is repeat them.
So he's 3-dimensional.
No, he's he's 2-dimensional, but one of those dimensions.
That was a joke.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. I mean, look, he's 2-dimensional on all of the bus stop stations his face is on across New York City.
I see what you're saying, and it makes sense.
Hooker called out Dustin Poirier after the fight.
Poirier said no.
If that fight's available, I like it. Poirier mentions he wants to fight. He's going to be fighting McGregor next.
Fighting the Irishman next. You're close, but not yet, buddy. Keep punching.
I mean, again, if Poirier versus McGregor is something they can reasonably put together, yeah, sure. That's a bigger fight.
Good luck with that, Poirier.
I like his chances more now than I did in their featherweight fight.
I mean,
he's done a lot to fix his game.
I feel like Cowboy was barking up that tree, and it made sense, and then didn't happen, and then I don't know. Now Connor's got to go to court over his latest.
Yeah, we'll get there too.
Thing. Yeah, I agree. I would like Poirier. I think more so than his first fight with McGregor.
Yeah, he's done a lot, especially defensively, that he has shifted up. That, I mean, again, if you watch their first fight,
he became a legit title contender after that. I mean,
went on a great run.
He gave Khabib a good fight. In many ways, a better fight than I think McGregor did.
it's weird because on the one hand, yes. On the other hand, it's such a weird thing. I think
he finished Khabib. That's better than Conor did, and Conor got knocked down, got socked in the face. His last time I checked, before he submitted.
By the same token, Conor also won a round. I mean, again, so it's what do you give more weight to?
I mean, it wasn't like an emphatic. It wasn't like a huge.
He's still the only guy to officially take a round off of Khabib. Though.
No, he's not.
Officially, yes. Look, if you want to talk about how bad the scoring is in the fight, I'm going to reference fair play, different discussion.
Okay, so officially.
Yeah, again, if you go to the official scorecards for the T-Bow fight, Khabib won 30-27 on all three judges' scores.
Every one of his fights, he's only officially lost one round, and that was to Conor as well.
That is the only round Khabib Nurmagomedov has officially lost in his UFC run.
I feel like
which is an absolutely absurd bit of dominance, by the way.
Okay. I think it's absurd. It is only one round.
I mean, look, again, watching that T-Bow Nurmagomedov fight live, I thought T-Bow won. Rewatching it, I'm more sympathetic to potentially Khabib winning, but I think at a minimum the second round should have gone to T-Bow.
Okay, but fair enough.
I mean, again, look, I've yelled about scoring plenty of times.
Poirier, I mean...
If the McGregor fight's not there for Poirier and Hooker's a good fight. I
like Poirier, but if you would do that fight, why not just do the fight with Cerrone? Who I think would deserve that fight more.
I don't know. Look, what kind of calculus Conor McGregor employs when making those decisions is beyond me.
I don't know. It just seems. I mean, the idea of McGregor even fighting again is just so. It's just like.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, when it happens, I'll believe it. Basically.
Okay, so Hooker came into this fight ranked 15th. Al Iaquinta was 6th. I imagine we'll see Hooker probably around 6.
Yeah.
You know, if the Poirier fight's not really on the table for whatever reason, I remember a few years ago, or maybe a year ago, after one of Hooker's wins, might have been the Jim Miller win.
Yeah.
I don't remember if it's that in particular, but Paul Felder interviewed him. He was doing commentary in the in-cage interviews, and Dan Hooker very politely said, I would love to, I need another fight at lightweight. I would like to fight you. And Paul Felder's response was, I would love to fight you too. And it never happened for one reason or another.
Felder's in the top 10 right now. I wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I'm completely down for that fight.
You could do Barboza.
For a guy, Hooker?
Yeah.
They already fought.
I mean, they did, but Hooker lost that fight, correct?
Oh, yeah, badly.
Yeah, so it might be too soon to do that rematch. Because Barboza's coming off a loss.
I think you could. I think the only other one I might look at is the winner of Gregor Gillespie and Kevin Lee.
I agree.
Other than that, I don't know what Felder's got lined up
next. Roll too right now. Gillespie's surging.
Oh yeah.
I mean, has he fought Cerrone?
Who, Hooker? No.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you want to do that. I don't know if that fight's a good idea either. What about Gage?
It's certainly not a bad fight. Gagey. I think Gagey's in the. I think because he's coming off of. God, who'd he knock out? Who'd he just knock out? Why can't I remember this? He knocked out Cowboy. God.
Right.
I think Gagey's in the. I think you keep Gagey on deck for when something happens to Tony versus Khabib again.
That's a good. Okay, good thinking. It's just getting that fight together. Getting that fight together is like parting the Red Seas. And can we even get both guys in the cage healthy? That's gonna be a big thing. But
I think you keep Gagey on deck in the title scene immediately, and again you go a little below that for Hooker's next fight. But I mean, it's lightweight. There aren't really any bad options.
Not like a barn burner, but like a good, solid technical fight. And I was real impressed with just the overall growth of Hooker as a fighter. I feel like he's continually getting better.
Yeah, he did a serious number on Iaquinta's lead leg. Those calf kicks were nasty. That's a technique people need to. There are ways to defend it. I mean, again, all techniques have positives and negatives. There's ways to defend it. Most of them just suck. But I think if you come into a fight, especially against someone who you got documented instances of using that technique, Hooker does a lot, you better have some kind of defense and not just be, I'm going to take it and punch through it. Because more often than not, that does not seem to be a winning strategy.
All right. So next at heavyweight, we have some new young blood in the heavyweight division. Sergey Spivak
from Moldova.
A cab driver, apparently. He's a polar
bear. A bit of a cab. He's a bit of a cab
driver.
Polar
bear, and he beat Tai Tuivasa, and he prohibited the crowd from seeing any shoeies last night. So no shoeies last night for the Melbourne crowd because of Spivak submitting Tai Tuivasa. I thought he looked pretty good.
He looked okay. I mean, it's just low-level heavyweight. You know, I mean,
I guess
I don't know what to. I don't really know how to kind of get a handle on it.
Is abysmal. There's that.
It's not good.
He got taken down, I think, 7 times.
Yeah, a lot for how short the fight was.
Oh, I wanted to see Spivak break the record for most takedowns in a 3-round heavyweight fight.
Yeah, he got pretty close to it. Again, Tuivasa did okay for about 2 minutes. That first 2 minutes, he looked pretty good. He was moving okay, landing good. He had a couple of good kicks, was engaging well and not getting sucked into stupid brawls.
Bear.
He was not fighting a polar bear. He was fighting a Moldovan.
The man's name is Polar Bear.
That's his nickname. If he changes it legally, I will call him Polar Bear. Otherwise, no.
His nickname is Polar Bear.
Yes. Yeah, Spivak had good timing on his takedowns after that, which is what led as much to his success, in some respects more than Tuivasa's somewhat deficient takedown defense. Good top control, kind of good passing. I mean, again, Spivak looked like a cab driver when he fought Walt Harris. So, I don't know. Again, heavyweight's a hard thing to get a handle on in a lot of respects. It's just a weird division.
It is a weird division.
So, yeah, good on Spivak. Tuivasa for a guy, he's now I think 4-3 in the UFC and on a 3-fight losing streak. Not good. Not a good look.
Lima versus,
oh god, this fight.
This fight sucks.
The fight wasn't awful. Not the worst fight of the night.
I thought.
No, Matthews and Achman was much worse.
Okay.
Lima defeats Luke Jamo via split decision. That was horseshit. Sorry. I don't know how I had Lima winning 30-27. I don't know which round they gave Jumo. I don't know which judge gave him 2 rounds. They should be publicly flogged. That is absolutely undescribably bad scoring.
So it's not even like hometown cooking.
I mean, I wish I could say that was the worst scorecard of, last night, but then, Triple G wins a unanimous decision in a fight he lost.
Okay.
Boxing aside. Look, Diego Lima's not a world beater, but
he won that fight.
He won this fight. Again, clearly won this fight. I don't know what that judge was smoking. Look, when even the UFC commentary team buries your scorecard, you have failed miserably as a judge. Kicking off the main card. About Lima. He's not as good as his brother. Douglas Lima is the much better fighter. But Diego's done a good job of shoring up his game, of making incremental improvements. And, again, world beater? No. Top 15? No. Solid enough fighter whose, story of progression over the last couple of years should be a motivating factor for a lot of people? Yeah. Kicking off the main card, Jorgen De Castro knocked the stupid out of Justin Tafa 2 minutes and 10 seconds into the first round.
At least it was short, because
Yeah.
with those guys' physique, I don't think it would. If it got out of the first round, it would not have been pretty.
Not just their physiques, but their technique. Oof.
Right.
Good win for good win for De Castro. Tafa just kind of lunged forward with his chin. Castro threw a straighter punch, clobbered him, put him to sleep. Again, low-level heavyweight action, but it ended quickly, so yay. As for the rest of the card, Jake Matthews.
You were so excited that Jake Matthews came out to Motorhead music.
It was a nice choice, he came out to Triple H's old theme of the game done by Motorhead. For those who may not have seen the fight, which is a good walkout song. I mean, it was for Triple H for many years. It still is if he chooses to use it. Solid piece of music for that. I know Triple H actually referenced on Twitter, it's a badass song. It is. And he then said this was a badass fight. Look, Mr. Levesque, on the off chance you hear this, I watched this fight. You could describe it as bad, or you could describe it as ass. I don't think you can conjoin those two terms in this one. This was not a good fight. Jake Matthews wins 30-27 across the boards. Man, Matthews, this is weird because he's still so ridiculously young. He's 25. But he's been in the UFC for 5 years. If he's going to turn into something, I think he's going to have to do it very soon. Because we've seen bits and pieces of genuine potential out of him, but
if he's going to now.
I mean, again, he had a good run coming back up to middleweight. In fact, at welterweight. At welterweight, he's only lost to Rocco Martin, who himself is on a really good run and probably should have at least got a draw out of that Maia fight.
I think he'll just be one of their Australian showcase type fighters.
Yeah, if he's not able to really kind of elevate himself in the next 18 months.
Sort of like John Hathaway in his time.
Yeah, Hathaway had that bit when it was like, okay, you could be something, and then just it never really clicked. Yeah,
right.
It happens. Look, MMA's hard.
Hathaway went on an impressive win streak at one point, and he collected quite a few wins, as I recall, in the UFC.
Yeah.
Where he kind of petered out.
Yep.
Not that Matthews is going to be the next John Hathaway, but there was a time where it looked like Hathaway was like a surging potential star.
Yep. I remember. That was a thing. All right. Callan Potter defeated Maki Pitolo via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the boards. I have nothing about this fight. It was a mediocre, low-level fight. I don't know what else to tell you. Yeah, actually, I do about this fight in particular. I think it was Pitolo who came in off the Contender Series. I prefer the Contender Series to the Ultimate Fighter as a product to consume. That said, I think there's a case to be made that the Ultimate Fighter is a better vetting process of your abilities than the Contender Series is, especially with the stated criteria by which Dana White makes his decisions on the Contender Series. So, again, I'm not saying we'll never see great fighters come off the Contender Series. I'm sure we will. But, again, if you look at kind of Dana's, for want of a better phrase, scoring criteria by which he makes those decisions, I'm not sure it will produce consistent, high-level fighters coming into the UFC the way we all kind of hoped it might. Maybe I'm wrong, but as it stands, just a little food for thought there. Your fight of the night, Brad Riddell defeated Jamie Malarkey via unanimous decision, 29-27 and 2 30-26s. Jamie Malarkey barely avoided a 10-7 in the third round, from my perspective. But since he did badly hurt Riddell with a left hook, got his back, had a choke attempt, it was enough to stave off the 10-7. Fight of the night, Really engaging fight. A lot of fun. I don't know what Malarkey's chin is made of because he ate bombs. He ate some absolute bombs from a really good kickboxer in Brad Riddell. So, good fight. Megan Anderson crushed a cab driver with a triangle choke, 357 of the first round. I don't know what the UFC is doing with featherweight, with women's featherweight specifically. I appreciate the effort, but at the moment, I don't think there's either market interest or just number of bodies to justify it right now. I think it's time to cut bait with that whole idea. And, in a couple of years, maybe you bring it back if the circumstances change. I appreciate the effort. They tried, and I think it was a worthy attempt. And I don't think they've done anything wrong as it comes to that division. I just don't think, I don't think there's a lot of marketplace interest. And I don't think there's a lot of, high-level female fighters at 145. Then kicking everything off on Fight Pass, we had Ji-Yeon Kim defeat Nadia Kassem via TKO body punches at 4:59 of the second round. Kim missed weight. She weighed 128 for this fight. This was the second time in a row that Kim has missed weight at flyweight. Time to head back to bantamweight for her. Kassem's not a UFC caliber fighter. And then, again, for the first fight of the evening, Khalid Taha missed weight and submitted Bruno Silva with an arm triangle choke 3 minutes into the third round. Yeah, good enough performance from Taha. Had a good first round, lost the second, came back, won the third. Finished in the third. The ability to mix, this is something you can take from both his performance and Spivak's. The ability to mix ground and pound in with your submission attempts is something that more fighters need to really kind of figure out. And I know it's hard to train because you don't want to punch your training partner in the face repeatedly to open up an arm triangle. But it is one of those points of differentiation between, it's not even really a point of differentiation. Because there are some less than great fighters, Sergey Spivak in particular, since I mentioned him. Not exactly a world beater, I can say without offending anyone. Did a good job in that element. And there's better fighters than him that don't. It's an element of the game that I think a lot of people are still figuring out. But if you can do it, it is a very, very big weapon. I mean, Jack Hermanson does it very, very well as well. The ability to inflict damage and utilizing the threat of damage or the reality of damage to open up opportunities for submission attempts. When it's done properly, you can tell when someone is really good at that. And there's some very, very good fighters who struggle with that integration process. So credit to him for that. All right, that's all I've got. Jeff, anything else from that group of prelims?
Nope.
Alrighty then. On that note, let's move on to next week. Well, this coming Saturday at least. The UFC is back in Tampa, Florida. Hi, Mark. Where they will be having UFC on ESPN Plus 19. Main event, former champion Joanna Jędrzejczyk back at strawweight after a failed bid to take the vacant flyweight crown when she was bested by Valentina Shevchenko. She's fighting Michelle Waterson. I imagine the winner here is the next challenger for, again, Weili Zhang. Jeff, is there any reason I should pick against Joanna here?
I mean, it's a fight. And Waterson is very good. She's very experienced. And she's won her last 3 against tough opponents. So I'm not picking the karate hottie, but yeah. I love Joanna.
I mean, look, it's a good fight. I'm just struggling to try and figure out
Look,
an avenue of victory for Waterson.
When Joanna fought Thug Rose, like, it was tough for me to pick against her in that fight, too. Like, I just didn't see how Rose was going to do it. And she did, you know?
Well, I think we both picked Namajunas in the rematch, didn't we?
Right. I don't remember, but I think you're right. It was mainly because of how the first fight went. This fight...
Crazy to me that Joanna was the favorite going into that rematch.
See ways that Waterson can come out on top just because she is very tough and resilient, and she is highly skilled, but I just don't see her beating... In a 5-round fight, I don't see her overcoming Joanna, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm going with Joanna here. Michelle's not at all a bad fighter. I don't mean to give that impression.
I mean, look, Joanna's not unbeatable now, and she is, I mean, it was a tough loss, but she is coming off that loss to Valentina.
My personal issue here when picking this fight, I don't really see points of conflict where Waterson has a definitive edge over Joanna. And
maybe.
If we were doing pure jiu-jitsu, okay. But Waterson's one of the few women who will actually wrestle.
She has 9 submission wins, and let's see. 2 of those were in the UFC. 1 was against Angela Magana, who,
Yeah.
And the other was Paige Van Zandt. So I don't see her submitting someone like Joanna, because Joanna's grappling defense and takedown defense are very good. But if she can utilize it, that might be an area where she can have success, possibly.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, Waterson's one of the few women who will actually wrestle instead of just go for headlock throws.
Right.
She does actually integrate those kind of hip tosses, but one of the major ways you can tell she's thinking about it, not just doing it out of habit, is her timing on it. She doesn't just throw it every time they clinch because this is all I know how to do. I think the size disparity here is going to be a big part of this fight. Michelle Waterson is a natural atom weight, not straw weight. And they both are strikers primarily. They will both fight in the clinch, but I have a hard time seeing Waterson have a lot of success against Joanna in the clinch. Again, I'm not saying Michelle can't win. It's a fight. I mean, we've said that a bunch of times. I'm just struggling to, again, from a purely predictive model kind of thing, figure out how many, where she's going to find the kind of success that would lead me to feel comfortable picking her. And I don't see it. So I'm going with Joanna, and Joanna versus Zhang would be a darn good fight. Your co-main event, another really good fight. Cub Swanson will fight Kron Gracie. If you're in the jiu-jitsu community, apparently the Gracies kicked Cub out of all of their associated gyms because he's going to fight Kron, which is pitiful. Kron Gracie undefeated in MMA, 5-0, 2-0 in the 1-0 in the UFC. Look, Kron has incredible jiu-jitsu. He has really, really good jiu-jitsu, even adapting it to MMA, which, again, there's things in MMA that complicate the issue. If he's able to force nothing but grappling in this fight, he can absolutely win. And Cub Swanson seems to be on a bit of a downswing. He's lost his last 4 fights. But Kron Gracie has one of the things that all the Gracies have.
He's a Gracie?
Well, I was going to say no chin. Look, the Gracies historically, and again, I'm not trying to
speak of.
Kron striking is all right. I actually don't have evidence of that.
Any good?
Yeah, he's not bad. He's done a pretty decent job of adapting his jiu-jitsu to MMA. He's good about forcing it. He's a really good he's a superb back taker. He's great at finishing from the back.
How can you just excommunicate a guy like Cub Swanson because of that.
Look,
it's Cub Swanson.
I am aware, and look, again, I think it's pitiful. I think it is one of those
disrespectful.
I think it's one of those unbelievably stupid. Again, I don't want to say like all traditions when it comes to martial arts are stupid, because they're not. Something like this is kind of it's on the stupid side of
I
things.
think it's mean. For one thing, it's mean-spirited. Like, I understand if he's fighting one of your guys, but work something out. Don't just like make him persona non grata if that is the case. But I don't know.
Again, there's a lot of traditions in some of the disparate martial arts like that are stupid, are unbelievably stupid.
I'm picking Cub Swanson.
Ditto.
By knockout.
I don't think Kron's striking is not nearly on the level of Swanson's, and I don't know how good his chin is, and I suspect it's not very.
He's only fought in MMA 5 times.
Yep.
And okay, like, he's beaten Bruce Leroy, Kawajiri, Tokoro.
I mean, look, the names that he has for how brief his career is in MMA are good names.
Right.
But Swanson represents a completely different level of opposition.
And you know what? Look, Swanson is getting up there. He's not a young man anymore. He's arguably not in the prime of his MMA career anymore.
He's not. I think definitively he's not.
But he's still Cub Swanson. And look, he went the distance with Frankie. Lost a split decision to Shane Burgos, and Moicano and Ortega are top-ranked featherweights in my mind.
Moicano used to be.
Used to be. Frankie just fought for the title. Ortega recently fought for the title. So 2 top-ranked featherweights in top of the division. And he gave Frankie. I mean, he gave Frankie a tough fight. Ortega, he lost in the second round. So, I mean, he lost that fight. Yeah, I just don't see Kron winning this one, but we'll see.
If Kron's able to very quickly force a clinch and drag things to the mat, yeah, he can win. I mean, again, his grappling is that good.
Cub does have quite a few submission losses on his record. He's been submitted by Frankie, by Holloway, Ortega, and Moicano. So, if you want to beat Swanson, that's definitely one way to do it.
Yeah, the more Kron can force grappling, the more he can, the higher his chances of winning. He has a very clear avenue to victory.
Lamas beat him by submission as well.
For a guy who's been a black belt for as long as Swanson has, his submission vulnerability in MMA seems to be relatively high.
Well, he's not afraid to take risks.
Also true.
So that can leave him to some openings, but
Again, I'm picking Swanson here on the whole, but unless Kron knocks him out, I won't be surprised.
I think we can do quick hits for the rest of this card.
Yeah, again, there's a few good ones here, but Brock Weaver will fight Thomas Gifford. I think Gifford's fought in the UFC once and lost. I could be mistaken though. That's just the local guy getting his shot. One of those two, it has to be. Go with Weaver, but who knows? Mackenzie Dern is back, trying to fight at strawweight. Jeff, I'm gonna make an unkind wager with you. How much does she miss weight by?
I mean, the woman recently had a child, so
yep.
I'm not going to make any such bet. I just feel...
I mean, look, I have nothing against Mackenzie Dern as a fighter, apart from the fact that she keeps missing weight. And
well, let's see. She's fighting at strawweight for this one.
Yeah. Yeah, she is. So again, that's kind of the question. So that's my question to you. How much does she miss weight by?
She should probably be at flyweight, shouldn't she?
I think that's more in
Isn't
keeping
that
with...
weight?
sort of.
I'm not. I mean, I hope she doesn't miss weight, and I'm happy she's back. She had a child over the summer, and she's fighting again. Good for her.
Yeah, I expect Mackenzie Dern to miss weight. Then I expect her to win the fight because Amanda Ribas is. I think she's fought once in the UFC. I'm doing that off the top of my head. Her name's familiar enough.
Yeah, beat Emily Whitmire in her first fight last June. That was her UFC debut, and she is 7-1.
Yeah, I don't have a problem picking Dern to win the fight. I'm not sure she's going to have a successful battle with the scale.
I don't know.
Luis Pena will fight Matt Frivola. Not a bad fight, actually. I'm not a guy who really gets the whole Luis Pena phenomenon. But he's, 3-1 in the UFC. And granted, a few of those wins are over. I mean, he beat somebody who never fought in the UFC again on the finale of his season of Tough. Lost to Mike Trizano. Beat Steven Peterson, who shouldn't be in the UFC based on merit. Beat old Matt Wyman coming out of retirement. Whereas Frivola is a much more proven UFC caliber fighter. Had a loss to Polo Reyes, fought to a draw with Lando Venata. He lost a 10-8 first round, or did Venata get a point deducted? One of those two. Tough fight, but he hung in there. Beat Jalen Turner, who a lot of people were really high on. I like Frivola here. At middleweight, Eric Anders fights Gerald Meerschaert. I kind of like Gerald Meerschaert, all things considered, but he's slow. He's kind of hittable. And that's a bad combination against Eric Anders. So I'm going to go with Anders, but if Meerschaert can avoid the power, force this to the ground, I think he will. He's probably got a good shot at submitting Anders. As for the prelims, James Vick and Nico Price. I'm shocked that's not on the main card. I am really surprised by that. Great fight. Really great fight. This is Vick debuting at welterweight, I believe. It's his UFC welterweight debut. He's only fought at welterweight once before, geez. But on the back of 3 losses, 2 of them knockouts, he's trying his hand at welterweight instead of lightweight. And Nico Price is Florida man. But I say that with a fair amount of respect because he fights crazy. So good fight. I'm going to pick Price, but again, that's a fight that it's hard to go wrong with when they get in the cage. Ryan Spann will fight Devin Clark at light heavyweight. That is not a good fight. We have a really good flyweight fight. Deiveson Figueiredo will battle Tim Elliott. Again, great fight. Tim Elliott, awkward, very engaging fight. I'm going to pick Figueiredo, actually. Figueiredo 16-1 overall. But if Elliott can force that to the mat, his wrestling and his submission game is the kind that will give Figueiredo a fits. Max Griffin will fight Alex Morono. That's not the worst fight in the world for kind of mid-level welterweights. I'll go with Morono. Also at welterweight, Miguel Baiza will fight Hector Aldana. I think Aldana's fought in the UFC. This is Baiza's debut. Go with Aldana. A middleweight fight between Marvin Vettori and Andrew Sanchez. I don't pick Andrew Sanchez to win fights at this point. Unless he's fighting an absolute can. He just will come out hard, force wrestling for a round and a half, gas out, and then just try to hang on. I think Vettori's a good enough fighter to punish him for all of that. So, yeah, going with Vettori. Women's flyweight, JJ Aldridge will battle Lauren Mueller. I need to confirm which Lauren Mueller this is. Hang on, I'm pretty sure I know, but it will affect my pick. Yeah, Yeah, go. Okay, yeah, this is going with JJ Aldridge. I don't know why. I could swear these two women have the same. Either their names are identical or just close enough that I constantly confuse them if all I do is look at their names. But anyway, JJ Aldridge. Not without a whole lot of. And then Marlon. This can't be the finalized bout order, so okay, I can't speak to that. Anyway, Marlon Vera will fight Andre Ewell. That's a pretty solid fight, actually. Ewell's gone 2-1 in the UFC, only losing to Nathaniel Wood, who's a pretty legit prospect, bordering on like top 15 contender, actually. And Vera's on a 4-fight winning streak and has like undergone a pretty dramatic transformation to his overall game. If you watched his debut against Marco Beltran, and I did, he looks nothing like that fighter anymore. He has done some major work to improve his game, and credit to him for it. Going with Vera there. All right, Jeff, anything stand out to you? Any prelims you kind of want to talk about?
James Vick versus Nico Price is a great fight and probably should be on the main card.
Yeah, I assume that the bout order listed on Wiki is not accurate at the moment.
Okay.
In fact, hang on, let me bring up the Tapology one and see if.
Like, why is Brock Weaver, Thomas Guilford on the main card right now? Unless that's inaccurate.
No, that does not seem to be inaccurate. One of these guys has to be native to Florida.
Okay, could be. I mean,
Weaver fights out of. He fights out of Alabama. Does he train out of Florida or something? He fight out of.
Mm-hmm.
I just need his team.
Regardless, I still think if you have a fight like Vic versus Price, you would want to put those guys on the main card because, I mean, yeah, those guys have had losses, but, you know, that's a potential fight of the night right there, don't you think?
Yeah.
Figueiredo versus Tim Elliott, that could be a really fun fight.
That will be buried on the prelims because flyweights.
Yeah. Which technically still exists at the moment, surprisingly. So that's about it.
All right, and again, that will be next Saturday. I will have coverage in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. So stop by, say hello, always appreciated. And yeah, that's what that will be what I'm doing next Saturday. All right, news of the week. Let's start with the big one. Former UFC heavyweight champion Cain Velasquez showed up on SmackDown when they debuted on the Fox network and attacked Brock Lesnar. They had a very brief encounter. Lesnar powders, runs away after he squashes Kofi Kingston to win the title. It's then been reported that Cain told the UFC he is withdrawing from the USADA testing pool. And given his physique and his desire to get into the WWE, that is not surprising. And look, Cain Velasquez could take me apart with one hand and one leg, all right? I am not saying the man's not a great, great fighter. He absolutely is. If we're in WWE and appearance matters, yeah. Just putting it out there. So he's effectively retired. He's negotiating a bit with WWE.
What are you saying exactly, Robert? Are you saying Cain is not main card ready? Is he not main event ready?
Main event for a WWE event?
Is
no.
He not full gear? Is he not full gear ready?
Oh, he's pretty clearly not at this point.
Oh, okay.
I mean, look, Alistair Overeem, give him 6 months to cycle up, and he looks like a WWE guy.
Right.
So again, where do you want to? I don't think Cain is officially signed with WWE yet, but they're going to be doing something with him and Brock at.
Has ESPN reported on this?
I don't remember where I saw it. Again, they're talking about how they want to do something with Cain and Brock at the next Saudi card.
Okay, so let's.
That's all. I mean, that's also where you're going to pay off Tyson Fury and Braun Strowman.
I've heard conflicting things though.
Yeah, he's as far as where he actually lands, he seems to be keeping his options open. He's talking with different places. But I do think they've kind of, at a minimum, it looks like right now they're operating on the assumption that he's going to do something with Brock at Saudi card.
And here's what ESPN reported. Velasquez said no deal has been signed, and he has also been in discussions with other wrestling promotions, including upstart All Elite Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling. Last I heard, he also still had a remaining commitment with AAA.
I think he has one more match for AAA.
I think that match was supposed to happen this month, and I'm not 100%, but I think that card might have been postponed. Cain is 37. For a lot of people, that's really past your prime as a fighter and athlete in combat sports. I think this could be a positive move for him to, continue, if he likes wrestling and he's a wrestling fan, to continue to get to perform and do something else now that his MMA career might be over.
Look, in 6 months, when he and Daniel Cormier form a tag team, it'll be great.
Right.
Because Cormier can do the talking.
Probably. Man, I mean, it's so weird because I never really expected this to happen to Cain. Yeah,
he was, again, DC's the one who's the documented pro wrestling fan. Always talked about wanting to make that move.
I never really knew that. Is Cain even a wrestling fan? I mean, he seemed to do well in AAA, but I never even knew he liked or enjoyed wrestling before.
Again, I don't know. I know he tried it out at the performance. He tried out at the performance center. He's done well. Tried out might be an exaggeration. He did some work with them occasionally. Again, he seems to really enjoy the lucha libre stuff that he's done.
I wouldn't say he washed out of MMA, but it's sort of like...
Yeah, he did. He's in this weird spot. He kind of occupies a similar spot to... This might seem like a weird statement, but let me properly flesh it out. BJ Penn, for a while, and if you stop looking at his career at a certain point, was for a while recognized as, again, one of the best ever, also somehow considered an underachiever. And I understand the reasoning behind it. If he'd made different career decisions here and there.
I don't think we can call Cain an underachiever, though.
Yeah, and hang on. Let me finish the point.
Okay.
Cain occupies a different but similar position in that probably the second best UFC heavyweight ever based on body of work. And yet there still remains a bit of that.
What if?
We know, yeah, like if things had gone differently, he could have been even better. And I don't think that's a very controversial perspective to have.
It's scary, but the 2 times he won the heavyweight title, I never thought he was going to, I thought no one was going to take that away from him.
Yeah, he smashes Brock. And we all thought, okay, because we talked about for years how good he was, what he was going to do when he debuted in the UFC at, I think, 2-0.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't find fights and then resumed smashing people in the UFC. Ascends to the title. And then,
right away. Well, not right away, but had, after the Brock fight is when he started, is when the injury issues first started sort of piling up.
He had the knee injury that he kind of had going into the JDS fight, loses to Dos Santos.
He was off so long going into that fight. He was off for a year, I think, because of a shoulder injury.
Yeah, there was that shoulder injury that kept him on the shelf. Yeah, he's not odd stat. Someone pointed out. First UFC on Fox card, Cain Velasquez is there. First UFC on ESPN card, Cain Velasquez is there. First WWE on Fox show. Cain Velasquez is there.
A bit of an obscure stat, but okay. It's weird. He only lost 3 times. Three times to Dos Santos, UFC champion, Verdum.
UFC champion.
UFC champion. The only non-UFC champion he's lost to at this point was Ngannou.
And it would not shock me if Ngannou becomes champion at some point.
But
if you just look at the timeline and the injuries, again, it's a weird thing for a guy who achieved that much.
The problem was he was not taking, he and I think American Kickboxing Academy were not taking good enough care of him. And just trying to avoid injury. And it seems like he was either overtraining or training too hard while he was hurt. And it just kept, I think that's what caused him to have those long layoffs and just, and those are what really killed him and his momentum. And to be frank, when he was off for almost 2 years before that fight with Verdum, he should have been stripped of the title.
Yeah.
He needed, it sucks because, he did, he beat Bigfoot, he beat Dos Santos. But when you're not defending the belt an entire year, he should have been stripped. Right?
I don't know.
I feel like they bet too hard on him building the sport for them in Mexico and kind of being the face of Mexican MMA for the UFC. He should not have held on to the title. They should have stripped it a lot quicker.
In the case we're talking about, yes, I agree.
Right.
I don't know. It's a much... like the discussion about how the UFC handles its champions.
He was not fighting from October 13 to June 15. Then he had a whole other year off for his next fight with Brown. Then we never saw him again until 2019. So it was really the injuries that really killed his career.
Yeah, and it's crazy for someone to have accomplished as much as he did and is as universally acknowledged as one of the best as he is, for there still to be a little bit of that, but but he still didn't live up to his potential kind of thing.
If not for the injuries, he could have surpassed Stipe. What we're talking about with Stipe right now. But look, 2-time UFC champion, I mean, he had a great successful career, all intents and purposes.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about again the second best UFC heavyweight ever. I think
his second run with the belt was a good run until he got derailed with the injury that put him off for almost 2 years. Because he defended again. And look, Bigfoot was having a good run at the time. Junior was still at a high level at that time. It was the trilogy fight. So, great career. But yeah, it's crazy to think that, if things had been different, could he have done even better?
Yeah. And again, it's a really weird space to occupy as far as that goes, but that's that's where he is, I think. When
Cain was at the top, he was scary.
If we kind of do the old, best I ever saw test, Cain Velasquez is the second best heavyweight I've ever seen fight.
I think he's better than Fedor.
I don't, but that's a completely separate discussion.
I think he, and quite frankly, I think he faced better and defeated better opposition than Fedor while he was champion.
I think he faced a more consistently high level of opposition. Yes, I don't think at the top level he faced. Put it like this. Hang on. Put it like this. Put it like this.
Or never did.
Put it like this. I think the best version of Mirko is better than the best version of Junior Dos Santos.
Sorry. No.
And again, they fought. JDS won. JDS has a long body of work. JDS.
No.
I
cannot abide.
I'm of that opinion.
And
certainly, okay, another one then. I absolutely believe the best version of Big Nog.
Are these rumors true though, that he's on WWE TV right now without actually signing a long-term contract?
I would buy that just because, again, the WWE makes a lot of uncharacteristic business moves as it pertains to their Saudi Arabia shows.
True.
I mean, and again, the next Sweet Saudi Blood Money, as Larry Zonka calls it.
But they haven't announced the card for Crown Jewel yet, and we have no indication this fight is in the works for Crown Jewel.
I think that's what's been reported, is they want Cain and Brock to do something at Crown Jewel. Hang on. They also want the Tyson Fury.
Rumor. It's not official.
Again, they also want the Fury Strowman thing to pay off at Crown Jewel.
Tyson Fury.
Tyson Fury, yes.
Yeah.
Look, it's a stupid angle. I don't like it. I'd rather Tyson Fury were boxing. But
they have really deep pockets in Saudi Arabia. Their economy must be doing really well right now.
Well, hold on. There's two different points. There's two separate points you're making there. One is the deep pockets of the people who are paying for the event. One is about the economy of Saudi Arabia more generally.
Right.
They're two different points. The people paying WWE for these shows and are making these kind of.
When I said that.
Okay, my mistake. I missed.
I'm aware of the dichotomy of the 2 points.
Yeah, look, the Saudi prince that wants to see Fury and Strowman and Cain and Brock in a wrestling match. Yeah, they're gonna. WWE is very, very accommodating of whatever they kind of want over there for a variety of reasons, most of which are money related. So, given that is kind of what I think they're going for with this, I can believe that he is on WWE television without a long-term deal locked up, assuming that the goal is assuming that all they're looking at right now is Crown Jewel.
Do you remember the Sacha Baron Cohen version of The Dictator?
I didn't see it, but I know of its existence.
Well, I don't think it's a great movie. I think Sacha Baron Cohen kind of went off a cliff after Borat in terms of quality. But I think there's sort of a valid perspective in that scene where you see just sort of what celebrities are willing to do, for payoffs with these sort of wealthy dictators. You know what I mean?
I mean, look, this is an MMA podcast. All I have to do is say Ramzan Kadyrov.
But like, there's a scene in that movie where like where Sacha Baron Cohen's character has had a tryst with Megan Fox, and it's Megan Fox in the scene, and he pays her with like a bag of like jewels and rubies and stuff.
That does not seem out of touch with reality, for as much as that movie tries to be a parody.
No, but I mean, we've heard of celebrities going to these like really sort of questionable events because like they got a check to be there, and they got like.
Hey, I mean, look, I'll give you another one that's coming up. The World Cup is coming up next year.
Yeah.
It's being held in Qatar, and there's gobs and gobs of evidence that the only way that country was able to get the necessary number of stadiums up to code for FIFA is with basically slave labor. There's tons of human rights violations issues that are circling around that entire event that no one's talking about because it's the World Cup.
This is the 2020 World Cup.
Yes.
Didn't they make a deal for one of the next World Cups to be in the USA, or is that 2024?
I think so. There's going to be part of it that's in there, yeah, because Qatar's the next one.
I thought one was going to be in Russia. Or was that the last one?
Might have been the last one.
I'm sorry. I'm not.
I'd have to double check a few of those things.
So they grease. You're saying they in Qatar they grease the palms basically.
I imagine part of that, and again, they were set. They were greenlit, and they were given, hey, if we're gonna do this, you need X number of stadiums to host the games, and they have to be up to. And here's the code we require you to meet. And the only way that it was able to be, that those conditions were able to be met within the time frame allotted, again, calls into question the practices used to get it done.
I think if Cain is retiring officially from MMA, this is probably a good fit for him. I don't think he needs to work a full-time WWE schedule. I think he can be a special attraction there, probably get paid good money. They could probably do something with Cormier at some point because we know he loves WWE, and he could. If they were to make Cain a more regular star, I would maybe make Cormier his mouthpiece or something.
And look, they can revisit, and this is an obscure reference even for wrestling, but they could redo the Sylvester Terkay thing where, Cain, where DC is his mouthpiece and also wrestles. And Cain just looks intimidating.
Now, Meltzer was saying on his show last night that the guy who should get the job is Jim Cornette. And I'm like, no. Are you kidding me? Why would you have Jim Cornette be Cain Velasquez's mouthpiece? It does not fit at all.
If Cain did the super traditional wrestling tough guy, but his whole shtick is lucha libre stuff. That doesn't even make sense. Unless you're just trying to play into
look, in
Cornette and Paul Heyman.
And what I will say, Cain's given a lot to this sport, so I have no problem if this is his new career. And I hope I hope he's getting paid.
If he's happy with the compensation, if he's fulfilled, Godspeed and party on. I have no issues with him moving on. And again,
I have issues with the Saudi Arabia stuff, but
okay,
it's a whole other thing. Yeah.
Again, that has Cain would be wrestling, maybe not in WWE just yet, but he seems to want to make a run at pro wrestling as what he does next. And again, I have no issues with that. God bless, man.
I think he should make an official announcement.
Well, again, I think they said that. I think he informed the UFC that he's withdrawing from the USADA testing pool.
That's the rumor, but it's not. He hasn't said anything himself like that, and I haven't seen it anywhere on ESPN or anything like that.
Oh, who were we citing when we mentioned it then?
I think that came from the Observer Radio.
See if let me pull it up and see if it's referenced.
That's where I heard it. Now, I'm not saying that's inaccurate, but
MMA Junkie says that.
Really?
MMA Junkie is reporting that Cain Velasquez informed the UFC withdrew from
it on MMA Junkie yet.
That's what is referenced on our site. Hang on. Let me click the link.
Yeah, if it's on MMA Junkie, then it's I would say it's highly likely. Yes.
So yeah, and again, there's shenanigans the UFC can use to get around USADA if they want to bring him back, but this is this is basically it.
It wouldn't surprise me if he tries to fight in MMA again, even if it's not the UFC. It wouldn't surprise me.
He is still technically under contract with them, even if he retires. So,
we've seen fighters get around that too.
I'm not saying it's an impossible scenario. I'm saying there are things to consider.
As much as I hate to say it, do you think Cain even has a ton of value to the UFC at this point?
With the right setup, yes.
Might not. And this is kind of the rough thing about this sport. The cruelty. It's a very cruel, selfish sport at times, Robert.
Yeah. It absolutely is.
That's that's kind of why fighters just have to be aware. They have to make as much money as they can, because it can be gone fairly quickly.
I mean, even when you're still young and in your prime. I mean, Robert Whittaker just had to fight Israel Adesanya coming off of a 18-month layoff.
And Whittaker is younger than Adesanya.
Yeah. I mean, Adesanya's 30, Whittaker's 28. Those two are probably going to fight again.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Again, not an immediate rematch, but probably somewhere down the line. They're both that good. Anyway.
The next thing I really want to talk about is this whole Bisping thing. Because when you posted that on Facebook, like, my mind basically exploded.
Well, okay, hang on. We can go into that then. All right. So on his podcast, Believe You Me, Michael Bisping, former UFC middleweight champion, UFC Hall of Famer. He's in the Hall of Fame, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, I think they put him in last year, like this year. Anyway, Michael Bisping, if he's not in the Hall of Fame, he will be shortly.
Yes, he is.
Unbelievably important figure in the history of the sport for a variety of reasons, positive and negative.
First British UFC champion.
Yes. Again. I believe the inciting incident to what happened was he was asked about his perpetual decision, how many times you saw him indoors with like sunglasses on, kind of thing. And his response was, I was hiding from the athletic commissions, and here's why. Then he proceeds to remove his right eye, which is now a prosthetic. He literally has lost the eye.
I wish I never saw that, but
it's plastic. Like it's a prosthetic. It's not an actual eye that he was pulling out of his head.
What I want to know is when did he get his eyeball removed?
I don't know. You'd have to ask him. If I were to, well, here's the thing, and again, the way Bisping phrased it, my inference, which is, I believe in my immediate inference was, he's saying that he fought in the UFC with his fake eye. I don't know that to be true, and I find it not impossible, but unlikely for that specific circumstance to have arisen. What I think is much more likely is the following. Because MMA Junkie, I think, when they talked about it, mentioned that he fought his last, 11 fights with no vision in his right eye. Now, again, that doesn't mean he had the physical eye removed at that point. It just means he couldn't see out of it, which is a whole other thing.
Look, I'm not going to say Bisping shouldn't have been allowed to fight, but here's what I am going to say. If this happened and the commission was not aware of it, this is an appalling indictment on the regulations and the activities of every athletic commission who regulated those fights with Bisping.
Okay, now, again, I don't know when he had the physical eye removed. I don't think that, and look, if he doesn't want to say, that's his personal medical information.
Okay.
Fine. I'm not, that's on him.
Does that even really fly here for, public regulatory bodies?
Well, hang on. It does in the sense that, again, now it does. Like right now, if someone asks him, so
but he
when did you
voluntarily revealed that he has a prosthetic eye.
Yes.
He did that himself.
Hang on, that does
He said, and I quote, how hard was it to fight with one eye? So he's basically implying that he's been fighting with a prosthetic eye for a considerable amount of time before he retired.
Yeah, that does seem to be the implication. I find that
I want to know when this happened, because
again, you'd have to ask him and you'd have to trust his answer.
I dug up an MMA fighting article because I remember when this eye injury happened for him. It was some years back, but
it was after the Belcher fight, right?
I think so. But in September 2013, there was an MMA fighting article by Sean Al-Shadi writing about him getting some eye surgery because of the detached retina. This all started because he had a detached retina.
Yeah, but I remember this because we made jokes.
Okay. He was supposed to be fighting Mark Munoz at UFC Fight Night 30. Severe eye injury in the lead up to that fight.
Yeah, I remember we all kind of, and I'm guilty of this, we made some jokes about it because of how the Belcher fight ended.
Hold on. He said he competed in consecutive fights against Vitor Belfort and Belcher with a detached retina, while his peripheral vision had degraded severely. By then, Bisping had already passed his annual UFC-mandated eye exam, so the injury slipped by unnoticed. And this was reported by MMA Fighting. He underwent surgery later that month at the Retina Institute of California to repair his damaged eye. For a time afterward, everything seemed fine. He went to follow-up appointments. Doctors cleared him to train, then cleared him to spar. Before long, Bisping was knee-deep in a training camp at Eric Paulson's CSW gym, but then it all came rushing back. Some sort of vision problems. Very, very thin slit of vision. They said, yep, your retina is detached. Obviously, I couldn't believe it. So I think he thought the retina had been repaired, but it was fully detached again because of that. I just don't know. What is going on here?
Well, again, I don't know.
This is bizarre.
Hang on. It's actually not. Hang on. Two things. One, I don't know when he had the eye removed. He might have only had it removed after he retired, and he was just completely blind in that eye.
Fall out, Robert. They don't just fall out one day, you know?
No, again,
he didn't misplace his eyeball.
He's also been retired for 2 years.
Okay.
He could have had it removed after he retired.
Why is no one asking? Why are we the only ones asking about this then?
I don't know.
I feel like other people in the community should be asking these questions.
They might already know and just, we're told off the record kind of thing and can't reveal it. I don't know.
But
hey, look, next time you get a chance, ask him when he had it removed.
All right. Do you think he was fighting with one eyeball with a prosthetic?
Do I think he was fighting with a full-on prosthetic eye?
Yes.
No.
Sonnen was talking on his channel that all of a sudden his eye, after a while, his eye looked like it had cleared up, and he said because it was a prosthetic. So Sonnen was basically implying that Bisping was fighting with the prosthetic for a while.
Yeah, so let me say this. No, I don't think he did. I would not be all that shocked if I'm wrong.
But if he did, that's it. Is that not illegal?
I'd have to double check the specifics of. I mean, what law would he be breaking?
What are the rules on your vision with one? Are you allowed to go into an MMA fight with just one working eye? Is what I want to know.
You are from a sanctioning perspective. No. Otherwise, there'd be no reason to stop a fight when a fighter has just one eye swollen shut. Otherwise, that is such a unbelievably hypocritical position to take if that is the case. If their stance is, you can be blind in one eye and we'll let you fight, but if your one eye swells shut, as a matter of course, if a fighter with two good eyes has one eye swell shut, we'll stop it.
But now that's an injury though, and
the concern is functionally the same.
Okay.
I mean, look, there's again the reason you stop a fight when a fighter has one eye swollen shut is because it is for
in this case, you don't have an injury that can be made worse.
No, but the issue is purely mechanical.
If he was totally blind in one eye and he was still allowed to fight, what do we do here? What are we doing here?
I mean, look, we can't do... Okay, again, a couple of things. One, there's nothing we can do now. It's all already happened. What are you going to do?
I think we need to have this discussion, and the commission needs to answer the commissions that oversaw his fights need to address this immediately. What needs to happen. That is what needs to happen.
That's a fair perspective. Here's another bit of reality.
I'm demanding some answers from them.
Okay, hang on. Look, Justin Gaethje's talked about how long his eyesight was just terrible. Like legally blind kind of eyesight. When legally blind is not the same as medically blind. I mean, he had laser eye surgery not that long ago. Right. That's why he doesn't have to wear those like Coke bottle glasses anymore.
Right.
Gaethje had terrible eyesight and was cleared to fight.
To me, there's a marked difference between being legally blind in one eye and then fighting with a prosthetic eyeball.
Yeah, again, if he's fighting with a prosthetic, that is a different scenario because those can break. Like there's a slight difference in like mechanical hazards.
Fighting with a fake eyeball in your eye socket.
Yeah, so again, it's one of the things where I'm not sure when Michael Bisping had the eye removed. If he just fought his last, say, 11 fights while being completely blind in his right eye, but with the damaged eyeball still in its socket, that's still a pretty damning indictment of all the commissions that let him fight. But what about Bisping? He's not look, if Michael Bisping fought his last 11 fights while being completely blind in his right eye, he is not the first fighter to pull that off. He will not be the last.
Okay.
Joe Frazier was famously for his last several fights completely blind in one eye.
Okay.
Harry Greb, old boxing reference, fought the majority of his 200 some odd fight career completely blind in one eye. In fact, he mentioned how he faked it too. He would just memorize when he'd go in for his physical, when the doctor was out of the room, he'd go up and memorize the eye chart. So that when he, would wind up having to cover up the good eye and can't see anything, they'd say, okay, read, start at the top and read down. He just had the whole thing memorized. Michael Bisping is not
I respect the guts, but I'm also sort of like...
There's kind of a tradition at this point in combat sports.
But I'm also like, man, what do the commissions even do?
I would love to know.
Look, every purpose if they can't figure this out.
Look, every time I'm skeptical of commissions or the sanctioning bodies, this is kind of why, because stuff like this is not uncommon. Again, if he actually fought with an actual fake eye in his eye socket, that is a level of incompetence on a regulatory standpoint that boggles the mind.
I said on Facebook, it's appalling.
So
it's one thing for Benson Henderson to sneak a toothpick into the cage, without anyone noticing. This is a whole nother matter entirely, Robert.
Look, fighters get into fighting with injuries all the time. And some of them, I understand, I will never be disproportionately angry at a commission if, someone says, oh, I got into this fight with a torn ACL. There's only, if the fighter goes in for a medical and is uncooperative or deliberately deceitful about the condition of their knee, the only evidence you can provide to the contrary would be something like an MRI. Other than that, you have to take them at their word. So I understand that, but I'd like to think we could get behind.
There was something that always weirded me out about the first Chael Sonnen failed drug test for the first fight with Anderson Silva. The news reports were saying that Sonnen, apparently told the commission that there might be something weird on, or something might come back high on one of his tests or something. And if he told them that before the fight, why did they allow the fight to happen? Now let me finish.
Okay.
The answer I read from the commission is that they cannot pull the fight for that reason until the test results come back. Is they did not have legal recourse to stop the fight without the actual results.
There's no.
Sometimes there's a reason for things.
There's no concrete evidence in that instance. I mean, a fighter who just doesn't want to have the fight could say, "Hey, my test is going to pop hot," just to get out of a fight, and then all the tests come back negative, kind of thing.
So all I'm saying is maybe there's a valid explanation for all of this.
It's not outside the realm of possibility. And again, fighters with bad eyesight or just fighting blind in one eye is not uncommon.
Maybe there's a rule about this. I have no idea, but I would like to know. I simply would like to know.
As would I. I mean, again, I'd like to think that, we can all kind of, and it's part of the reason I think I imagine he was fighting with, again, just being blind in one eye rather than with a prosthetic, because if you shine a light into a prosthetic eye, there's there's not just no reaction, but there's no depth to it. It's a flat surface.
Right. So if he was fighting with the prosthetic, I feel like this has got to be one of the most.
That is absolutely ridiculous. That is one of the most stunning regulatory fails in the history of MMA.
You would have to be a cartoon Nick Riviera type doctor to make that mistake.
Yes.
I don't know.
So again, I don't know when exactly he completely lost eyesight in the eye. You'd have to ask him. You'd have to ask when he had it removed, and then you'd have to trust that he's being forthright with his answers, and which again is kind of how that has to go, I suppose. But for the record, here's Michael Bisping's last, 10 fights going down, starting with the most recent going back. Gastelum, George St. Pierre, Dan Henderson, Luke Rockhold, Anderson Silva, Talis Latis, CB Dollaway, Luke Rockhold, Kung Lee, Tim Kennedy. Yeah, that's his last 10. Go to Alan Belcher if you want to go to 11. That's dating back to 2013. These took place in the following locations. Shanghai, China, where the UFC self-regulates. New York for the George St. Again, going top to bottom, going most recent to latest. Gastelum was in Shanghai. The UFC self-regulates in China. Blame the UFC. New York for the GSP fight. Manchester, England. Inglewood, California. London, England. Glasgow, Scotland. Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Sydney, Australia. Macau, also in China. Quebec City, Quebec. And Newark, New Jersey. To any of the governing, sanctioning bodies for any of those locations, if at all applicable, I feel like people should be fired for this. This is a shocking failure of regulation.
Unless there is just some real explanation for it, which there might be. I don't know. I'm not sure.
There's all kinds of weird rules. Who knows? But yeah, look, again, anytime I am skeptical of governing bodies or things like that, for the record, stuff like this is why. Because the evidence that they are actually performing the function they are designed to perform is not nearly as concrete as people would like to think it is.
All right. Is there any other burning news this week?
A couple of shorter things, I suppose. because we have to talk about this, Conor McGregor has been charged with assault stemming from the incident where he punched an old dude in the face in a bar in Ireland. His court date's set for, I think, the 10th or 11th of this month. I don't know what'll happen. Might get a slap on the wrist. Might just be, pay a fine kind of thing. I don't know. But such is the reality. But again, it's Conor. He's on camera committing assault. From a legal definition standpoint, he commits assault. I don't know how else to say it.
At least he apologized for this. But it's Conor McGregor. What can you do?
That's true.
I just hope Israel Adesanya has a good group of people around him who aren't going to let him just make such insane decisions. Like reliable people who aren't going to encourage him to go to New York and throw dolly carts at buses.
Agreed. All right. Last thing then I suppose that I have. This for UFC 244, that's the upcoming card on November. Great card, again, very stacked. Got another fight added to it recently. A lightweight fight between Kevin Lee and Gregor Gillespie.
Oh, that's a great fight.
Really great fight. Unbelievably important fight for both gentlemen. It's going to be this is a very stacked card. It's probably not going to be on the pay-per-view portion of the card. But that's a great fight. That's a very important fight. We should absolutely be paying attention to that one. It's Kevin Lee coming back to lightweight.
I like Gillespie.
I'm kind of leaning that way too. But again, great fight.
Uriah Faber says he's interested in a fight with TJ Dillashaw.
I don't care. Look, Dillashaw's got another, year on his suspension. Yeah.
Oh, so Cyborg is going to I think we talked about that.
I think we're out of stuff now. I think the other stuff unless you have something else that has come up recently.
That's all I have for this week.
Well, let me refresh Twitter, see if anything crazy has happened.
Triple H, I mean,
I don't think anything. I don't think anything new.
Out of 243.
Yeah, that's all right.
That's a good fight for 244. It's a good looking card right now. I hope it stays that way.
Yeah, really good card. All right. Let's go ahead and get into plugs then. Let's get out of here. So, what do you got to plug this week?
My review of Joker. That's #1 movie this weekend. Tough movie to talk about. Tough movie to discuss. I think there was a lot of controversy about the film that was kind of unwarranted. Here's what I would say. If you're okay with very dark, brutal, intense films, I would say just go see this movie once and see what you think regarding just Joker movie.
I mean, my favorite movie is Silence of the Lambs. I don't think this movie is going to unsettle me.
Next movie is going to be... I mean, Joker, it is a lot like, almost kind of like a Silence of the Lambs or kind of like Taxi Driver or Seven, but just like mainly from the perspective of the deranged serial killer.
So mostly Taxi Driver then.
Next movie reviews will be Gemini Man with Will Smith and then Zombieland 2 Double Tap. Going to do both of those. And a couple more indie films I have coming up in the pipeline. One, Parasite, and The Report. I'll probably just do reviews of those as well. And yeah, and hopefully some more wrestling interviews will be coming out on the 411 Wrestling Interviews podcast channel. You can check that out on YouTube and Stitcher, Spotify, and the App Store, or I guess Apple Podcasts. So that's it for me for this week. Thank you, Robert.
All right, as for myself, this week, Mark Radulich, I believe Alexis Hana, and I'm not sure if Jason's going to be there or not. He might be. We'll be getting together on Damn You Hollywood to talk about Joker, which I have not seen yet. I will see before I review. this last week. There was no movie review last week, but you can check out all the stuff I do over on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network as well. So again, feel free to do that. And yeah, coverage on Saturday of UFC on ESPN Plus 19. I hope you'll all be there. We'll be back next week to the next couple of weeks on Fridays over in the Wrestling Zone of 411 Mania, I am covering Impact because they're basically running against SmackDown, and Larry Zonka can only do so much. So I will be covering the last couple of episodes of Impact before they move to Access TV again, kind of at the end of the month. So
Wrestling Wars are back. Enjoy it, wrestling fans.
So again, we'll be back here next week to review UFC on ESPN Plus 19, and we will preview UFC on ESPN 6. It's a card. The main event's good. Dominic Reyes and Chris Weidman. They rebooked Yair Rodriguez and Jeremy Stevens for that card because ESPN has a hard-on for anyone from the NFL who now fights in MMA. Greg Hardy's on the main card. Joe Lozon's coming out of retirement. Again, it's not a great card, but it could be worse. So we'll give you a full rundown next week, and of course, whatever might have changed between now and then because it's MMA. Yeah, that's it for us. Thanks everyone again for listening. However you found us, be that Stitcher, Transistor, Google Play, Apple Music, whatever. I don't really care how you found us. I care that you listen. That's the primary thing. We'll see you next week, hopefully. Until then, stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.